Hello everyone. The 2026 FIFA World Cup was supposed to be America's golden ticket, the biggest sporting event in human history. 104 matches, 48 nations, 16 cities across 3 countries, and the United States sitting right at the center of it all with 78 games on home soil, including every single knockout match from the quarterfinals all the way to the final at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. This was supposed to be a $30 billion economic explosion, 185,000 new jobs, hotel rooms booked out for months, airports overflowing with international visitors, and billions pouring into restaurants, retail, transportation, and entertainment from coast to coast. That was the plan. That was the promise. And right now, less than 90 days from kickoff, that promise is falling apart in real time. What is happening instead is something that nobody in Washington, nobody at FIFA, and nobody in the American tourism industry saw coming. Or maybe they did see it coming and just refused to believe it because the numbers do not lie. International tourism to the United States dropped 5.4% in 2025. Let that sink in. While the entire rest of the planet saw international travel rise by 4% last year, America went backwards. The United States of America, the country that is about to host the single biggest sporting event the world has ever seen, is the only major nation on Earth that saw tourism decline. Not flat, not stagnant, decline. And the people who study this, the economists, the tourism experts, the hotel chains, the airline executives, are all saying the same thing, quietly behind closed doors and now increasingly out loud in public. This World Cup might not deliver what everyone promised it would. The scariest part is that the fans, the millions of soccer supporters from around the world who were supposed to flood into American cities this summer with their wallets wide open, many of them are not coming. They are going somewhere else. They are going to Toronto. They are going to Vancouver. They are going to Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey. They are choosing Canada and Mexico over the United States. The reasons why tell a story that goes way beyond soccer and straight into the heart of where America stands in the world right now. Let us start with the biggest number, because that is what makes this story so staggering. FIFA and the World Trade Organization released a joint study projecting that the 2026 World Cup and the Club World Cup together would generate roughly $47 billion in economic output and add $62 billion to global GDP. The United States alone was projected to see a $17.2 billion GDP boost and the creation of 185,000 jobs. Those are not small numbers. Those are transformational numbers. Individual host cities were projecting economic impacts that would reshape their communities for years to come. Atlanta was expecting over $1 billion from hosting 8 matches, including a semifinal. Dallas was projecting between $400 million and $415 million in direct economic impact from 9 matches. Houston was looking at $1.5 billion from 7 matches and training camps. Los Angeles was expecting nearly $600 million in total regional impact. The New York and New Jersey area, hosting the World Cup final at MetLife Stadium, projected a $3.3 billion economic impact and expected to draw 1.2 million visitors. Boston Consulting Group estimated the entire tournament would generate over $5 billion in short-term economic activity across North America, supporting around 40,000 jobs and over $1 billion in new worker wages. Airbnb alone estimated its hosts across 16 U.S. cities would generate over $2.6 billion in revenue during the tournament. These projections were not wild guesses. They were built on the assumption that international tourists would show up in massive numbers because international visitors are the golden goose of event tourism. On average, a foreign visitor to the United States spends 4 times more per person than a domestic traveler. 4 times. That means when you lose international visitors, you do not just lose bodies and seats, you lose the highest spending, most economically impactful segment of your entire audience. And that is exactly what is happening right now. So what went wrong? How did we get from the most anticipated sporting event in history to a situation where the U.S. tourism industry is openly panicking about whether it can even come close to hitting its targets? The answer is complicated, but it really comes down to a few massive factors that have all collided at exactly the wrong time. The first and most obvious is the dramatic collapse in Canadian travel to the United States. Canada is not just any source of international tourists for America. It is the single largest source of foreign visitors. In 2024, Canadian visitors made approximately 20.4 million trips to the U.S. and spent roughly $20.5 billion, supporting about 140,000 American jobs. That relationship is the backbone of cross-border tourism in North America. And in 2025, Canadian travel to the United States fell by approximately 30%. That is not a dip. That is not a correction. That is a collapse. Statistics Canada reported that return trips from the U.S. were down more than 26% in October alone, compared to the previous year. The reasons are layered. A weakened Canadian dollar made trips south of the border more expensive. Ongoing trade disputes and tariff tensions soured the overall relationship, and stricter border controls, along with several high-profile incidents of travelers being detained, created genuine anxiety about crossing into the U.S. Travel experts described it as a perfect storm of political frustration, economic pressure, and personal fear all converging at once. This is not just a number on a spreadsheet. This is real money disappearing from border state economies that depend heavily on Canadians driving across to shop, eat, stay in hotels, and spend in American communities. When 20 million visits suddenly becomes 14 million visits, the ripple effects are enormous, and they are being felt right now, from New York to Michigan to Washington State. But it is not just Canada. Travel from Australia, India, and Western Europe has also declined. The share of global international travel heading to the U.S. fell from 8.4% in 1996 to just 4.9% in 2024, and dropped further to an estimated 4.8% in 2025. Meanwhile, arrivals to other major tourism destinations, including France, Greece, Mexico, and Italy, all increased during the same period. The world is traveling more than ever. People have money to spend. They are just choosing not to come here. The U.S. Travel Association's CEO laid it out in stark terms at a recent industry conference in Los Angeles, noting that domestic travel was basically flat when adjusted for inflation, while international inbound travel was down more than 5%, making the United States the only major nation in the world to see a decline in travel last year. The CEO of Expedia called the decline concerning. The CEO of Marriott said the country needs to make the world feel welcome, and all of this is happening in the shadow of a World Cup that is now less than 3 months away. Here is where the story gets really interesting and really concerning. The 2026 World Cup is being hosted across 3 countries. The United States has 11 host cities and 78 matches. Canada has 2 host cities, Toronto and Vancouver, with 13 matches. Mexico has 3 host cities, Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey, with 13 matches. On paper, the U.S. should be the overwhelming winner. It has the most games, the biggest stadiums, the knockout rounds, the semifinals, and the final. But the early data is telling a very different story. Reports indicate that U.S. hotel bookings for the World Cup period are trailing behind Canada and Mexico in year-over-year growth rates. Ticket prices for matches in the United States are significantly higher than for comparable matches in Canada and Mexico. The cheapest tickets for the U.S. opening match at Sophie Stadium in Los Angeles are priced well above what fans are paying for opening matches in Mexico City and Toronto, and average group stage ticket prices in the U.S. are notably higher across the board. In a sport where traveling fans are everything and the atmosphere in the stands is half the experience, price matters enormously. When a fan from Germany, Brazil, or Japan is deciding where to watch their team play and sees they can attend a match in Toronto or Mexico City for significantly less money, with an easier visa process, less anxiety at the border, and a host country that feels genuinely excited to have them rather than suspicious of their presence, the choice becomes obvious, and the booking data is already reflecting it. Then there is the visa situation, which may be the single biggest self-inflicted wound in this entire saga. A proposal from U.S. Customs and Border Protection would require visitors from the 42 nations that participate in the visa waiver program to provide their social media details from the past 5 years as part of the ESTA application process. These are not travelers from high-risk countries. These are visitors from the United Kingdom, Australia, Japan, South Korea, Qatar, and much of Western Europe. Traditionally, some of the biggest spending, most reliable sources of international tourism for the United States. Immigration law firms have warned that this increased data collection could slow down ESTA processing times and prompt travelers to seek simpler entry options in Canada and Mexico. Privacy concerns about submitting 5 years of social media history to the U.S. government are real, and they are already affecting decision-making. On top of that, a new visa integrity fee of $250 has been proposed, along with a separate $100 charge for foreign visitors to national parks. Each of these measures individually might seem minor, but stacked together, they send a very clear message to the rest of the world. Coming to America is getting harder, more expensive, more invasive, and less welcoming. And people are listening. Now let me tell you about something that almost nobody is talking about, but could end up being one of the most significant aspects of this entire World Cup from a geopolitical and human rights perspective. Travel bans currently restrict nationals from multiple countries from entering the United States. Among those banned countries are several that have actually qualified for the 2026 World Cup, including Haiti, Iran, Senegal, and Ivory Coast. Think about that for a moment. There are nations whose soccer teams have earned the right to compete on the world stage, whose fans have dreamed of watching their country play in a World Cup, and those fans are literally banned from entering the host country. They cannot buy a ticket, book a flight, or walk through an American airport to watch their team play. In the entire history of the FIFA World Cup, this kind of situation is virtually unprecedented. The former president of FIFA, Sepp Blatter, publicly backed a proposed fan boycott of World Cup matches in the United States. While a full boycott by national teams is unlikely given the massive revenue at stake for football associations, the sentiment behind the movement is real and growing. European soccer leaders have discussed the possibility. Fans across Latin America have expressed deep hesitation about traveling to the U.S. Online forums and social media are filled with comments from people who had tickets and travel plans and have since canceled everything. One Canadian fan described having tickets to a match in Texas and plans to visit family in New Jersey, saying they had canceled everything. Fans from Latin America have posted similar sentiments, saying they simply do not feel comfortable traveling to the United States right now. And here's where the economic math gets really brutal. Several U.S. host cities have already scaled back or completely eliminated their official FIFA fan festivals, the massive public viewing areas that traditionally attract hundreds of thousands of people who do not have match tickets but want to be part of the World Cup atmosphere. They are enormous economic drivers, bringing in casual tourists who spend money on food, drinks, hotels, shopping, and entertainment, even without ever stepping inside a stadium. Jersey City, New Jersey, which sits right next to MetLife Stadium where the World Cup final will be played, has already canceled its planned fan festival. Other cities have significantly reduced the scope of their planned public events. Without these fan festivals, the incentive for international tourists to visit the United States during the World Cup drops significantly. For many fans, the experience is not just about the 90 minutes inside the stadium, it is about being in a city that is alive with the energy of the World Cup. Strip that away, and you strip away a massive portion of the economic activity these cities were counting on. The data from the National Travel and Tourism Office is not encouraging either. Early figures show a nearly 5% decline in global visitation to the U.S. in January 2026 alone, with forecasts suggesting this trend could persist through the summer. The World Travel and Tourism Council conducted a study confirming that the United States is the only country out of 184 analyzed expected to see a decline in international tourism. Their president and CEO said publicly that the world's biggest travel and tourism economy is heading in the wrong direction, not because of a lack of demand, but because of a failure to act, and that while other nations are rolling out the welcome mat, the U.S. government is effectively putting up a closed sign. Meanwhile, Brand USA, the national destination marketing organization responsible for promoting the United States as a travel destination, had its federal funding cut deeply in mid-2025, leading to staff shortages that have reduced the country's capacity to counter negative sentiment through positive promotion. At exactly the moment when America needs to be telling the world to come visit and be part of this incredible event, the organization tasked with doing that has been gutted. The timing could not possibly be worse. Now, I want to be clear about something because perspective matters here. The 2026 World Cup is still going to be a massive event. Stadiums will be full. Millions of people will attend matches. Billions will watch on television. The economic impact will still be measured in the billions of dollars, and American host cities will still see significant tourism activity. The question is not whether the World Cup will be a success. The question is whether it will be the historic, record-shattering, once-in-a-generation economic bonanza that was promised. Right now, the evidence suggests it probably will not be, at least not for the United States. The mix of attendees is shifting toward a much more domestic audience, which is great for filling seats, but does not generate nearly the same economic activity as international visitors. The projected $30 billion impact is being openly questioned by economists who believe the actual number will be significantly lower once you factor in the decline in international arrivals, the cancellation of fan festivals, the scaling back of tourism marketing, and the enormous security and infrastructure costs eating into net profits for host municipalities. And here is the final piece of this puzzle that deserves the most attention. While the United States is struggling with all of this, Canada and Mexico are quietly winning. Toronto and Vancouver are positioned to be the darlings of this World Cup. Mexico City, one of the greatest cities on earth, is hosting the very first match of the entire tournament at the legendary Estadio Azteca, one of the most iconic stadiums in the history of the sport, a venue that has hosted 2 World Cup finals and is steeped in more football history than any American stadium could dream of. Guadalajara and Monterrey offer incredible culture, food, and atmosphere at a fraction of the cost of attending matches in the United States. For international fans who want the full World Cup experience without the visa headaches, the border anxiety, the social media screening, the sky-high ticket prices, and the general sense that they might not be welcome, Canada and Mexico are right there offering a compelling alternative. And every dollar a fan spends in Toronto instead of New York, every hotel room booked in Vancouver instead of Seattle, Every restaurant bill paid in Mexico City instead of Los Angeles, that is money the American economy is not going to see. That is a job that is not going to be created. That is tax revenue that is not going to flow into an American city budget. The economic impact does not disappear. It just moves north and south of the border. I want to leave you with this thought because I think it captures the deeper significance of everything we have discussed. The FIFA World Cup is not just a soccer tournament. It is a global referendum on the host country. It is a moment when the entire world turns its attention to you and forms an opinion about who you are, what you value, and whether you are a place they want to visit, do business with, and engage with for years to come. The 1994 World Cup in the United States generated over $1.4 billion for host cities and fundamentally changed the trajectory of soccer in America. It led directly to the creation of Major League Soccer. It introduced millions of Americans to the sport. It showed the world that America could host a world-class football event. That was the legacy. That was what one World Cup did for this country 32 years ago. The 2026 World Cup, with 48 teams instead of 24, with 104 matches instead of 52, with the biggest stadiums and the biggest media market in the world, should be exponentially bigger and more impactful than 1994. The infrastructure is there. The demand is there. The opportunity is there. But the question that hangs over everything right now is whether America is going to seize that opportunity or let it slip away while Canada and Mexico quietly collect the benefits that were supposed to be ours. The World Cup kicks off on June 11th. The clock is ticking. The world is watching. And right now, a lot of the world is deciding to watch from somewhere other than the United States of America.